Like the kind of the doghouse.
Henry Cejudo, a good fighter or a great fighter? This is the question I have after UFC 288, in which Aljamain Sterling retained his UFC bantamweight strap after beating Henry Cejudo in a split decision. And a relatively competitive fight. I scored a 3-2 Sterling in the end. I felt as if Sterling's activity and a few rounds where Cejudo kind of wasn't doing a lot. And I felt as if Sterling just took initiative. He had the activity was very good. He's very awkward on the feet, Sterling. I think the range was a real problem for Cejudo, who really struggled in the fight. I don't think he really ever asserted his dominance in the way which I think he would have wanted to. And I think he was saying Cejudo that Sterling did surprise him. And I want to sort of get into that comment, but I do wonder with this. So I'm going to go into Aljamain Sterling later on. So in terms of the fight, I'm going to do another video on Sterling because I think his reign is quite interesting. But in terms of this specific video, I want to talk about Cejudo because there's a rhetoric, a narrative around Henry Cejudo that, you know, he retired in 2020. He retired after beating Dominic Cruz. Before that, he had beaten Marlon Moraes to capture the bantamweight belt. He had beaten TJ Dillashaw down at flyweight to stop him from capturing the second belt, and then obviously beat DJ before that. So some good wins, and I don't think you can take it away from Cejudo. He is an excellent fighter. What he's achieved, greatest combat athlete of all time, is a very good chance, to be honest with you. You know, I do wonder though with Cejudo because I'll be honest. So I like Cejudo. I think he's an excellent fighter. However, a lot of people were talking about, and people might ignore this saying it wasn't a real thing. There were some people who said you may have to put him higher on the GOAT category if he were to beat Aljamain Sterling. Now, let me look at Henry Cejudo for a fighter a second. So, as a fighter, Cejudo was obviously an Olympic wrestler, but he's from that Yoel Romero thing of he doesn't use it as much. You know, there's some fighters who just don't. I don't know. I think the Nick, he knows it tires him out. For whatever reason, I don't know why. I mean, I'm probably if I look into it, maybe I could find out. But the Olympic wrestling doesn't translate well to mixed martial arts, grappling and wrestling. You know, the Sambo style translates well, and I think it's because there's a wide open mat. For Olympic style wrestling, you're not working against someone off the cage, and I don't know. There's something about it. Chain wrestlers tend to do very well, like Colby Covington, but you know, you look at a lot of guys who transition, like DC, an amazing Olympic wrestler. Yeah, his wrestling was very effective in certain fights. Dan Henderson, he threw him all over the place. Gustafsson, I think that was the only thing that stopped him from being knocked out in the fight. Against John Jones, it didn't work, but John Jones is a wrestler within himself, so, and he's very long, John Jones, so I need to go, so I don't go for that too much. But then, Stipe Miocic, I think DC should have enough to beat Stipe. I know he's got some wrestling background, Stipe, but to me, DC should have had enough to beat him, just purely off the grappling. But he didn't. And even against Rumble, he only really got most positions, I felt, because Rumble gave it to him, you know. And again, it wasn't like he dominated, I felt, in that sense either. I just feel with DC, he's an excellent fighter, he's a legend, but it never translates. His big wins came from his hands. From that little thing he used to do where he get you in the clinch and hit you with uppercuts and then knock you out. He knocked Stipe out with the overhand right. So, that's one thing. But the wrestling, it translated well, but I just didn't feel it translated as well as what Khabib's grappling did, or what Islam Makhachev has done, or what Chimaev is kind of translating to. You know, Damian Maia's jiu-jitsu translated well, but it didn't work in the long term. Ben Askren's a bit of a weird one because I felt he was never going to work regardless, and stylistically he's not built, in my opinion, for the UFC, but his didn't work. You can go through so many who just didn't work. We'll see what happens with Bo Nickel. Will his work, you know, fighting guys who aren't really at that level at the moment, but the more he fights better competition, the more he's going to get tested. And, you know, with Cejudo, he's got that Olympic background. He was able to take Aljamain Sterling down quite easily in the first round. However, he didn't use it throughout the whole of the fight. Cejudo, and he was using this. He's been using this for a while. This sort of karate stance, and yeah, all right, it works to a certain extent against a certain type of opponent. But you got to understand, Cejudo's not a striker. There is a reason why the likes of Derek Brunson, when he couldn't take Israel Adesanya down, got absolutely lit up. There is a reason why Leon Edwards was able to KO Kamaru Usman in the fifth round of their second fight. You know, there's a reason when he got to defeat why Conor McGregor KO'd Chad Mendes. I could go on. There's a difference between learning striking and having a background, having that knowledge of it. Conor McGregor had the knowledge of it, and that's why his sort of karate hopping side to side, it wasn't really karate, it was just bouncing. It works really well. You know, yes, Kamaru Usman learned a lot of great striking over with Trevor Whitman, but ultimately, what he got set up with was he got baited in perfectly by Leon Edwards in order to land the head kick by showing him the left and then hitting him with the left high kick. You know, you look at Israel Adesanya. Look at what happened. I know Derek Brunson was hurt. Look at what happened when Brunson could not take him down, and once he got hit with that knee, Adesanya picked him apart. And it's because the knowledge of a striker is far more than one of a wrestler, and it works in the opposite discipline. The wrestling side, you know, a guy like with Khabib is going to be much better than Conor McGregor in said department. It's just natural, right? There's no martial artist who is 100% at every single thing. There's always one specific thing that they are good at. You know, Aljamain Sterling's jiu-jitsu. You know, Henry Cejudo's should have been wrestling or should be wrestling. I look at you know, go for the champions. You know, Volkanovski's is his striking, his point fighting. You know, Edwards is his striking. You know, Adesanya the same. Jamal Hill is. Come to think of it, UFC's kind of get dominated by strikers, which is a good thing. The only real grappler I think is Islam Makhachev, really. You could include John Jones in that, but John Jones is a little bit more versatile than just being a wrestler, so I'll give him that. But going back to the fight though, Cejudo has this karate stance, and honestly, it's going to sound really stupid because I love watching striking. It was almost horrible to watch in a way because I just don't feel it suits him to an extent, and I like him evolving and trying to learn different things, but it just feels as if it's almost the wrong thing to do against a guy like Aljamain Sterling. I'll put it to you this way: I felt Cejudo would have been much more beneficial if he kind of charged at Aljamain head first. You can't be relaxing at Sterling. One thing you say about Aljamain Sterling, if you're relaxed in there with him, he will take you out with ease. It's one thing that happened to Corey Sandhagen. He was too relaxed and Aljamain made him pay for it. I think Sean O'Malley, be interested to see how he does. You look at Piotr Jan, he was relaxed, but the difference with Piotr Jan is he's very methodical. He knows his fight IQ is, I think, even though he got emotional, I felt, in the Sterling fight against O'Malley, I don't think he respected his power and his skill. O'Malley enough against Merab, the cardio killed him. His fight IQ is, in my opinion, Piotr Jan, that of be beyond most of the bantamweight division. But again, fight IQ isn't just going to win you a fight. But in terms of Cejudo, though, I just feel as if, you know, that just didn't work against Aljamain Sterling. His hand up, and Conor McGregor mocked him online and did like a funny little video and this and that. But honestly, I can't understand why he'd laugh at it, because I don't think that style, when you see guys who are wrestlers, grapplers, and they try to be like these striking experts, it annoys me a little bit. But not in a way that I feel not, but just like, you know what you're good at. I feel just honing more on that and then build everything else around it. It feels like Cejudo, he didn't really grapple as much, and I don't know why. Maybe it tires him out, maybe. But to me, if it's your best avenue in a title fight against a guy like Aljamain Sterling, use it. So how easy he was able to take him on the first round. You know, you create the openings, the takedowns would have been there for you, but again, for whatever reason, he wasn't doing it. And it's not as if he did badly in the fight, Cejudo, by any means. He did very good. I mean, it was a close fight in the end. I said I didn't really know confidently who won it, but I kind of was leaning towards Aljamain. So I think Cejudo would have a better chance to me sort of switching his game plan. But in relation to what the video's about, good or great fighter. So Henry Cejudo, due to his accomplishments, due to him being an Olympic champion, a double flyweight and bantamweight champion, gets brushed. Gets almost put with this painted with this brush where I don't know if he's necessarily up there. So I'll explain what I mean by this. Olympics, great achievement. I don't dismiss that. You go through his big wins, his career. First, start off with the Mighty Mouse fight. Now, an incredible fight, first of all. Obviously, remember Mighty Mouse kind of had Cejudo limping all over the place with his limp foot for a second, or whatever they called it. Calf kicks, that's where they kind of... That's the real first big example I can remember in recent years where it really felt as if a fight was badly affected by them. And, you know, Cejudo, he really tried to work on Mighty Mouse. I haven't watched that fight in a long, long time. I think he did take him down once or twice, but I forget. I haven't watched that fight in a while, to be honest. But at the time, I felt it was close. However, it was a close fight. You beat Mighty Mouse. It's an incredible accomplishment. But let's not get this twisted. He beat him. It wasn't as if he dominated him. It wasn't as if he knocked him out. A lot of people to this day still feel that fight was a robbery and that Mighty Mouse should have won the fight. That's your title fight. There's a bit of an asterisk there on that one, and I think it should be mentioned. Now, regardless, you beat Mighty Mouse. A very close fight, and a fight I think a lot of people felt Mighty Mouse should have won. You move on. You fight TJ Dillashaw at flyweight still. TJ was a skeleton in there. Now, that's not Cejudo's fault. I know. TJ decided to do that. Decided to take EPO for that fight as well. However, a depleted TJ Dillashaw is not that TJ Dillashaw is not the same as the one that fights a bantamweight. It's a completely different guy, and he was dead in there. You know, it's no surprise that Cejudo was able to drop him so easily with that shot because, you know, he was a skeleton, and ultimately, I don't buy this, but there is an argument maybe the fight could have gone on longer. I don't think it should have. I think it was a good stoppage, but you know, TJ was out on his feet, but it's a depleted TJ. It's not the same TJ. It's not the TJ who, you know, beat Cody Garbrandt, because it wasn't the same weight. To me, there's just a lot that isn't really... they didn't really go for TJ in that fight, and I feel, even if you look at it, yeah, it's a good win from Cejudo, but there's still an asterisk there. That's 2 fights he's going to asterisk over, really. Because even though people want to look at this Dillashaw fight as well, question mark there. Ultimately, it is way too out weight cutting. That fight will be used as a good example because TJ looks dead in there, and we all know how dangerous weight cutting is. Move on to Marlon Moraes. Amazing victory. I'll give him respect. He really did an amazing job of, you know, coming from behind in that fight and really kind of making the right adjustments and getting the victory. So that I give him a lot of credit. However, again, context. What has Marlon Moraes, as good as he was, done since then? Not a lot. And I know it's not fair because, again, hindsight's everything. Moraes was a very dangerous guy at the time, but to me, it's not as if you're fighting a Piotr Jan of now, or fighting what Aljamain Sterling is, or a guy who's won the belt. Like, you know, you're fighting a guy who unfortunately hasn't really been able to live up to what he was supposed to be. You know, you're fighting a guy who's got absolutely flatlined by Corey Sandhagen. You're fighting a guy who's, you know, really struggled in his last few fights. I mean, you know, you want to look at Marlon Moraes. His last fight, let me bring his record up here. So, he, obviously he's not in the UFC, hold on 1 second, not in the UFC anymore, I think he's in the PFL now. Fought Brendan Loughnane, lost. Again, he lost a few of the PFL ones. Lost to Song Yudong, with a 1 round KO. Lost to Mirab, got TKO'd by him remarkably. Lost to Rob Font, 1 round. Lost to, that's the one, Sandhagen with the spinning wheel kick. Aldo got the victory, which he arguably could have lost. And then obviously the Cejudo fight. So, it's not as if he's gone on since he's lost to Henry and been great Moraes. As an amazing fighter as he was. I really did like him. And you want to look at that. Then it doesn't age well, but he was a good guy at the time when he won. He then fought Dominic Cruz, Cejudo. Dominic Cruz, a legend, but an old man and a shell of himself. He's not the same fighter he was. 2020 he wasn't, and we've seen now today after that fight against Chito Vera, it's pretty obvious that he still isn't. Dominic Cruz in his prime was a great fight. It would have been a great fight with him and Cejudo, but he's out of his prime. And he fought a guy out of his prime. And again, arguably, that fight, I don't even arguably, I thought at the time it was a good stoppage from Keith Peterson to try and stop the fight with Cejudo caught him with the knee and finished him with strikes. But looking back at it, Dominic Cruz was fine. There was no problem there. He didn't give good signals, yes, but to me, there's a fine line between stopping a fight when a guy is hurt or just about to be put out, like what happened with Adesanya and Pereira, and then what happens with Cruz and Cejudo. So another asterisk, and then he retires, and then he's pretty much begging to come back the moment he is talking about fighting Volkanovski and what have you. And then you then go on to him coming back now, and now he lost to Aljamain Sterling. Again, it was a close fight. I don't discredit him. It was a good performance from him, but especially with all that time out. However, it feels as if his accomplishments almost, you look at them just as accomplishments, they almost are all, I don't know how to describe it, they're almost, they sound great without context. With context, that is when it looks a little bit thingy. And I feel his accomplishments almost got to Cejudo's head a little bit. And in my opinion, I think he's a good fighter, but I felt like he overlooked Aljamain Sterling. And he said it himself, he was better than he fought. How can you really, how much, I don't know. He's a great mind, Cejudo, but how can Aljamain Sterling surprise you? He didn't do anything in that fight that surprised me, and I've been watching him. I'm a fan. What more could you expect Aljamain Sterling to do other than do what he always does? He didn't do anything. It wasn't like he came out boxing amazing. Like he does what he always does. And so that makes me think, I just wonder if those accomplishments have made him a little bit too confident in his own abilities. There's still a lot that he needs, to me, not to prove, but to almost show me that he's at the level that I think he thinks he is. He is talked about. You look at the accomplishments. You look at all the double champs, for example, in the UFC history. Conor McGregor, Amanda Nunes, Daniel Cormier. Have I missed anybody else? I think that's pretty much. I think that's it. But I forget. But they're the ones I look at, anyways. First of all, people laugh at Conor McGregor now. Don't get it twisted. He does some questionable stuff. He isn't the guy he was, but this guy was one of the best fighters in the world at the time. Yes, he, in my opinion, got the title shot a little bit prematurely. I know he was a featherweight champ, but to me, still, it didn't sit right with me when you had Khabib and Tony Ferguson there. But the fact that he went in there, knocked out Eddie Alvarez in 2 rounds, showed you how good he was. And Conor McGregor, irrespective of whatever he does now at this point, if he gets KO'd by Michael Chandler, it doesn't matter. Because ultimately, I don't think people view him the same. I think people view him, the Conor McGregor that people loved almost died in that Floyd Mayweather fight. And that was it. He cashed out. And fair enough, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But that's what people view him as. Because people view him now, he fights completely differently. It feels like his attitude isn't the same. And ultimately, he's the biggest star the sport has ever known. He's not in the same realm as him, but in terms of mixed martial arts, he's like the Muhammad Ali because of how big he was, how much he got people watching it, he got eyes everywhere. That is a legacy within itself, so I think that should be said. Then you got Amanda Nunes. Amanda Nunes literally beat every single, you think of every great female fighter in her era, she beat them all, barring the ones obviously with the lower weights, but Holly Holm, one of the best, beat Ronda Rousey. She ended up knocking her out in, was it 2 to 3 rounds or something like that? I forget, it's a long time ago, that one. Knocked out Ronda Rousey within how many seconds? Ronda Rousey, the pioneer of women's mixed martial arts, destroyed Miesha Tate, who beat Holly Holm within a round. Miesha Tate didn't look like she even belonged in there with her. Beat Valentina Shevchenko twice, although I'd argue the second one was a bit dubious. But regardless, still a great victory. what she did to Chris Cyborg was one of my favorite finishes ever because of the way she just blew her out. And then, you know, you then look at, Juliana Pena beat her in a rematch. She's now fighting Irene Aldana. I think, and Megan Anderson and others as well come into the picture. But she's just dominating everybody. Like, Nunes is the greatest female fighter of all time. And I think her record speaks for itself. You look at Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier did amazing work. He'd been every single light heavyweight, and light heavyweight was the division at the time. Alexander Gustafsson, Anthony Rumble Johnson, John Jones, DC. Glover was around and he was dangerous. And then you couple that with the likes. Dan Henderson would occasionally come up in weight, and then Lyoto Machida was around. So many greats, and I think when you look at Daniel Cormier, amazing commentator now. I mean, amazing maybe he's hard. He's a very good commentator nowadays. I really enjoy him, and I enjoy his the content that he creates. But he almost retired from that and has become everybody's favourite. I don't know, just personality it feels. And I think the reason for that is because of what this guy achieved, and when he talks, you listen. As much as he's funny and he's got a personality, this guy's knowledgeable. And you look at it. So we'll go from the moment he beat Roy Nelson, he beat Patrick Cummings, beat Dan Henderson, lost to John Jones, beat Rumble Johnson, beat Gustafsson, beat Anderson Silva, beat Rumble again. No contest against John Jones, but he lost the fight. Beat Ozdemir, beat Stipe Miocic, beat Derek Lewis, then lost the 2 fights to Stipe. So Stipe Miocic, the heavyweight GOAT, he beat him. Gustafsson, one of the best light heavyweights at the time, beat him. Same with Rumble, one of the scariest guys, God rest his soul, beat him twice in the same exact way. Dan Henderson, another vicious guy, beat him. And there's no, these guys were out of their primes. No, the only context you have with DC, with any of them, is that he had the thing with the towel with the weight for the second Rumble fight, and then Stipe came off of hard fight with Ngannou after he fought, before he fought DC. The fight after he fought Ngannou, he fought DC, and it wasn't that long after. So maybe you could look at that, and he got eye poked. That's the only thing. But regardless, the way he beat all those guys, there's no question marks about it. And then you think of Henry Cejudo. Think of Conor McGregor, the biggest star in the sports history. Think about Amanda Nunes, the greatest female fighter in the sports history. Think of Daniel Cormier, beat the heavyweight GOAT, beat the best light heavyweights in the world, barring one man who is the GOAT. He beat everybody. And, heavyweight, light heavyweight champion. I think only the second man to do it, if I'm not mistaken. And now it's shown how great of a mind he is. A legend in the game. One of the great. If it wasn't for John Jones existing, and obviously Stipe, Daniel Cormier would have had a flawless record. And I think, people look at DC. How many disadvantages did DC have? He was smaller than pretty much everybody. I can't remember the time he had to reach advantage over any of them, but he still performed every single time, and he's looked at as one of the greats. So, biggest star in the sports history, greatest female fighter of all time, and then one of the greats, Daniel Cormier. Then you look at Henry Cejudo. I don't know if he stacks up to those guys. And Henry Cejudo came out and said, when Conor was cussing him, about how his resume isn't the same as Conor's resume isn't the same as his. God honest truth, I think it's actually closer than people are willing to admit. You look at Conor McGregor's resume. Jose Aldo in 13 seconds. Then obviously he beat the likes of Chad Mendes. Beat Dustin Poirier. Obviously Poirier wasn't the guy. Now he was on the rise, same as Conor, but he still beat him. Nate Diaz wasn't exactly a fantastic victory, but he beat Nate, which I wouldn't class as amazing either. But if you then look at beat Eddie Alvarez, got the win against Cowboy Cerrone. Now Cerrone's wins one, loses one, we all know it. But if I compare him to potentially, could you compare him to Marlon Moraes, who's now lost a lot of fights since that he fought Cejudo, or possibly, I don't want to say Dominic Cruz, because Cruz is one of the greatest bantamweights, but there's arguments that you can almost stack each one against each other. You could stack Jose Aldo, Demetrius Johnson. You could put a TJ Dillashaw against possibly Dustin Poirier. You could put an Eddie Alvarez maybe maybe against a Marlon Moraes. Maybe you put a Cerrone with a Cruz, or maybe you flip it. Maybe you could put a Chad Mendes with Marlon Moraes and then put the Cerrone there. I don't know. You could. I'm not saying that it's 100%, but I think it's a lot closer than people are willing to admit. And this is what I mean with Cejudo. He's a good fighter. But in order to be great, I think he still has some things to go. And this is why, if he retires or whatever, I think he's a very good fighter. To me, when I think of the great bantamweights of all time, I don't think he's the greatest flyweight because I think that's DJ. And I don't think he's the greatest bantamweight because, in my opinion, it's a toss-up between TJ and maybe Dominic Cruz. But open for interpretation. Maybe Sterling might take that. But to me, I say TJ Dillashaw is the greatest bantamweight personally. And again, I know you might say, oh, but he beat him. He didn't beat TJ at bantamweight. He beat him when he was deprived, when he was skinny, frail. It just wasn't the same. And this is where I like Cejudo. I think he's an amazing mind. He analyzes fights and he will know what he did right and wrong in his fight. However, I just feel as if the talk of him being this unbelievable great, you think of the greats, you think of Khabib, you think of GSP, Anderson Silva, John Jones, DC. And, look at GSP, an example. GSP beat every man at welterweight. Any guy he lost to, he avenged the loss. He then took so many years off, way longer than what Cejudo did. Came back against Michael Bisping. Now, yes, Michael Bisping, he did select it, let's be real, but Michael Bisping ain't no walk in the park. Beat him and submitted him in the fight, knocked him down in the fight. Came back after so long into a division where he'd never competed in before and won the belt. To me, this is why I talk about greatness. That's what GSP is. A lot of people like to talk about Khabib. He didn't have enough title defenses. He wasn't this and that. Khabib fought the best guys in his division and made them look like they didn't even belong in there with him. That to me is greatness. I look at Anderson Silva. He was doing stuff that nobody had ever seen before. And yes, in the end, he got a bit complacent. He messed around, got knocked out, broke his leg, and then wasn't the same. But he's still one of the greats. You look at John Jones, greatest of all time. Beat every single man they put in front of him. Only got one fight where he got disqualified for. And now I feel it should be overturned, that, to be honest. Beat DC. Beat the likes of Lyoto Machida. Beat Gustafsson. Beat Cyril Gane recently. Beat a lot of these light heavyweights now. Beat Gustafsson twice, for a matter of fact. Beat DC twice, even though they had a no contest, Beat OSP. I could go through, so many. Beat Chael Sonnen, I could go through the whole of John Jones' resume. Beat it over there, But ultimately, when you look at the resume then of Cejudo, I just don't think it stacks up to those guys. Not and Mighty Mouse the same. The amount of title defenses that Mighty Mouse had, to me, if you want to be in that conversation, you've got to defend your belt so many times. And if you'd done that bantamweight against this crop of bantamweights, I would put him up there, no question. But I just think a little bit of that, him being a great and one of the great, I just think it's a bit premature. I need to see him do a lot more still. But I don't deny he's a great fighter. And he's a great fighter in terms of his skills, but I just don't think he's a great in terms of right now. I don't think he's achieved enough. Like comparing to a lot of the greats, like I said, I just don't think he's there. And I would probably put Conor McGregor on par with him, to be honest, because Conor McGregor, say what you want, like I said, in his prime was beating everybody. And when Cejudo says he hasn't got anything from my resume, this and that, it's the accomplishments. But those accomplishments, without the context, it just doesn't feel as, I just don't think it looks as good as maybe it may seem. But, regardless, this is why I wasn't surprised why I picked Sterling to beat him. I think he's good, but I just felt like Sterling would have the edge, and in the end he did. But interested to see where he goes from me. He called out Merab. That'd be a good fight if you can beat him. Yeah, back on the bantamweight trail, it'd be interesting. But yeah, just my little thoughts on Henry Cejudo. Is he a good fighter, a great fighter? Let us know. But I have questions. All I'll say that. But yeah, Henry Cejudo, Aljamain Sterling was a good fight. I'm gonna do a video on Sterling on his reign and where he ranks. I feel with the bantamweights at the moment. But yeah, until next time.